Hello, everyone. Welcome to my session on mastering Dataverse for teams to build Power Apps for teams. Before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors, ScriptRunner Global, DQ Global, Proximo 3, Redspire, Agilicis, and Hitachi Solutions. A little bit about myself. My name is Hardit Bhatia. I work as a Power Platform architect at Hitachi Solutions US. I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP and a certified trainer. So, what is Dataverse for Teams? Most of us, if not all of us, have used Teams, and the same applies to Power Apps as well. Both are super strong platforms. And what Dataverse for Teams does is it brings the power of the two together. The way I consider it is it's a light version of Dataverse, and I don't mean that in a bad way, right? So, what I mean by light version is it gives you a lot of benefits of a relational database like Dataverse does, but then it's slightly less complicated from a security perspective. So it does offer row level security. But if you want to get too deep into it, where you need field level security or business units, that's when you would want to switch to a full Dataverse. It brings with it a new set of controls called Fluent UI controls. And in a couple of slides, we will go deep into those controls and see how they are, how do they differ from classic controls. And then the biggest one, right? So it recognizes features that are available within Teams and allows you to perform actions and interact with Teams from within your apps. So one thing I want to do before we get too deep into it is to share with you the 5 template or sample apps that we at Hitachi Solutions US have created for Dataverse for Teams. First one is inspection. It allows you to create inspection checklists that frontline workers can use to inspect areas or assets. It offers a manager app where you can set up areas, assets, inspection forms, and then the user app that can be used to perform inspections. Next is issue reporting. It allows team members to report issues. Same thing as inspections. You can manage issues where you can set up issue templates. And then there's an actual app for the users to use those templates and report issues. Third is employee ideas. Allows employees to generate ideas and organize them by campaigns. And then employees can vote on those ideas, and you can take the necessary or appropriate action on the ideas you want to act on. Next is bulletins. It allows you to manage company communications or org-wide communications within Teams. You can share content with like text or videos, and it's a great place for you to organize the communications that you might want to share within your organization. Last one is milestones. It allows you to manage projects by creating work items and activity log, which records every step that has been taken on projects. So the reason I wanted to mention these apps is because whatever patterns, whatever concepts we will discuss today, these template apps will give you hands-on experience to those patterns. So if you want to look at some of the design patterns that we have used to make our apps Teams ready, just go into these apps, look at those patterns, and you can use those not just within your Teams apps, but even within your apps that you create outside of Teams, whether they are on full Dataverse or SharePoint or any other data source. With that said, one of the biggest questions, right, that I hear a lot from users who are using Dataverse is, since I'm using Dataverse, why do I even care for Dataverse for Teams? A lot of reasons, right? First is Teams integration. So Dataverse for Teams not just gives you access to Power Apps within Teams, but it brings with it some really cool integration capabilities between Power Apps and Teams. And we will take a look at those capabilities for apps that are built on Dataverse for Teams and also on apps that are built outside of Dataverse for Teams. The design patterns are really cool. And by that, what I mean is when you create a new app in Dataverse for Teams, the layout that comes out of the box gives you some really good design ideas. And in the next slide, I'm going to go deep into that point. And then the biggest one, it helps avoid app sprawl. And what I mean by that is if you have a lot of standalone apps, it can get difficult for people to access them. If they're accessing those apps through web, they'll have to bookmark or have access to the URL somewhere. But if you are adding your apps to teams, you can organize your apps based on like the team's team. So, for example, if there is an HR team, you can include all the HR apps within that team. So, if I'm part of the team, I know that if I want to access one of my apps, I can just go to my team in Teams and access the app I want to. So for those reasons, Dataverse for Teams is relevant even to users who are using full Dataverse. With that, I'm going to switch gears and go in the studio. So this is my Teams window. To add Power Apps to Teams, the first thing you would want to do is click on these three dots on the left-hand side and search for Power Apps. And it will show up here. And then one thing I would suggest to do is click on the three dots here and then pin it. I already have it pinned, so it gives me an option to unpin or uninstall it. But definitely pin it so it's available on the left-hand side navigation. And then when you click on that one, it brings you to this screen. From here, there are a couple of different ways you can start creating an app. First one, obviously, right? There are actually two on this page. You can click on create an app or new app. But one thing you will realize as soon as you do that is it gives you a tablet layout by default. What if you want a phone layout? For that, click on see more. And it will show you the apps that you have access to if there are any. And then if you click on see all, this is a cool little trick because when I started off with Dataverse for Teams, I assumed that every app will be tablet layout, and I couldn't find how I could create a phone layout app. So now if you see the new button or new option here, and if you click on this arrow and then you go to Canvas app, that's when it gives you the two options, form factor and tablet form factor. So that's how you would get started. I'm just gonna create an app, and it will ask you to select a team. And once that happens, if you give it a name, let's say create, it's going to take you inside Power App Studio within Teams, which is mind blowing, right? So you're used to going to make.powerapps.com and then going to the Maker portal. This actually opens the Maker portal within Teams. So you can do wonders remaining confined within Teams world, which I think is super cool. So once this gets ready, we will take a look at the layout that I was talking about. So I'm going to name the app Scottish Summit 2021, save. So this is the layout that I was talking about. If you remember, if you go to, if you create an app by going to make.powerapps.com, typically what happens is you see a gallery on one screen. And when you click on the gallery, it takes you to another screen where there is a view form and it shows the details of that record. Then there is an edit icon, which when you click on that one, it takes you to another screen where there is an edit form, right? So not the most optimal way to address that functionality. But if you look at this one here, it's really cool. There is a gallery on the left-hand side, which allows you to use a lot of real estate that's available on the screen. And a couple of other cool things, right? The first thing which I've always vouched for is never use a view form, because it doesn't really serve any purpose, in my opinion. And the reason for that is, if you use an edit form, it lets you view, create, and edit records by controlling its mode. So absolutely no reason to use a view form. And that's what this template does, right? It uses an edit form by default. So the structure is actually pretty simple: a gallery on the left hand side, um, a form on the right hand side. If you click on a record, it will show the details of that record here. And then it actually uses all the features of an edit form. If you click on new record, it basically changes the mode of this form to new. And when you're viewing a record, it gives you an option to edit or delete it. And what happens is, if you click on edit, as you can see, everything grayed out. So it actually disables selection of other stuff, like other records as an example, or clicking on new record as an example. So the user is kind of guided through the process. So a lot of cool patterns here, that, like I said, you don't have to just use those patterns within Dataverse for Teams. You can actually incorporate them in all your apps. And that's something I have started doing ever since I've been working with Dataverse for Teams. So strongly suggest looking at some of the patterns. They also, use the container controls, and that again obviously helps you to make your apps responsive easily. So a lot of learnings with just by clicking create app, and I haven't even done anything with the app yet. So so that is one advantage of looking at these apps. Few other things that will help you make your apps look part of Teams is knowing what font and font sizes are used in Teams. So the font is Sego UI, and font size is 10.5. And if you look at the template that we looked at, it has those values or features. The font is set to Sego UI and the font size to 10.5. The other UI aspect is it uses sentence casing. That one has, initially, when I started off at Dataverse for Teams, I had a tough time adapting to that, because I've always used to, capitalizing the first alphabet of every word. So if you're creating an app within for Teams, whether it's Dataverse for Teams or any other data source, using sentence casing will make your app look part of Teams. So next is again a UI aspect, the new set of controls called Fluent UI. And there are a lot of features. The main thing is it comes with Teams colors set by default. So what I mean by that is, if I go back to my studio, if you click on the plus icon here, if you're used to adding controls from here, that option is not available. So you have to click on the plus sign here, and then it gives you access to all the controls that are available. So with Fluent UI controls, some of the features that are really cool are, so if I add a text box, and if I add a date picker and a button, I'll use these three controls to kind of show you what's really cool about these Fluent UI controls and why they are better if you're creating apps in Teams. So if you look at, let's take a look at this button. So very few properties, first of all, right? So if you have looked at the classic control button, there are a lot of properties. You probably even have a scroll bar to take you through the entire set of properties. But here it's pretty simple. One thing that might surprise you is the fact that this particular button has a purple Teams fill color. But if you look on the properties section, the color appears as white or transparent. That's because Fluent UI controls by default have Teams colors. These properties just allow you to override those colors if you want to. Some cool properties or some newer properties with Fluent UI controls are things like button type for the button control. There are two options, primary and standard. If I switch to standard, it makes this button like a standard button within Teams. So very quick access to some really cool UI properties for controls. Another thing another one that I really love is the date picker control. I've always had a lot of issues with the date picker, classic date picker control that's available within full Power Apps or full apps that you created for Dataverse. If you look at this one though, like it looks pretty slick, has a lot of functionality. You can switch between months, you can switch between years here. Looks pretty neat as well. So these controls are definitely super cool. One other feature of these controls that was available at some point of time, and I'll tell you why it's not right now, is if you change your team's theme. If I change it to dark, these colors change themes. That was available at, I would say, until a few months ago. That feature has been disabled for now because there is some work going on with these Fluent UI controls and classic controls that are going to be available in Teams. So once that happens, it's really cool. And I think if I open Teams in my desktop app, it actually still works. If I go to one of my older apps, let me do that here. I really want to show you that because I think it's super slick. And if you go to those 5 sample apps that I was talking about at the beginning of the session, those apps also adapt to Teams theme. But there are certain features that I will talk about in the next few slides that we have used to make those controls adapt to Teams themes. So if I go here, if I go to Power Apps, and if I open one of my old apps, so I think it's one of the apps that I created ages ago. So let me see if that feature is still available in that app for me. If yes, we will actually get to see how cool that looks. Because a lot of people, right, like me, I always use my Teams in dark mode. And if my app is all white, sure, it'll work fine, but it just doesn't look in line with the theme. So let's see if I go to my oldest app here. Um, Really, really cool feature. And like I said, it doesn't happen now, but it will come back in the future, hopefully near future. So when it does, definitely use that feature. Have your apps adapt to Teams themes, which again, if you think about it, before Dataverse for Teams, that would have been a Herculean task. But now it's it's something that all of your apps can have. So since I'm in dark mode, these controls adapted to the Teams theme. So now the date picker is even more beautiful, and the text box and everything adapted itself to the Teams theme. And if I switch to default, you can see that the controls behind change their theme as well. So super cool feature. I'm eagerly waiting for it to come back. So watch out for that, and as soon as it does, make use of it. Another thing that I want to highlight is these new controls have certain properties that have been renamed. So, for example, if you're using the date picker control, you might have been using the selected date as date picker dot selected date. That is no longer available. So, if I want to access that this particular date controls selected date, I will have to do. So let's see what the name of this control is. And it's date picker one. I'm going to copy that and then go to this label or text box and type in date picker one. If you look for selected date, you're not going to get that because that property has been renamed to value. Now, if I select a date, it will give you that date. So definitely watch out for properties that have been renamed. Tripped me over a couple of times when I was starting with this. So that being said, classic controls are not that bad. And if for whatever reason you want classic controls within your Dataverse for Teams apps, you can go to settings and then advanced. And then I believe it's an experimental feature. Yes, it's the last one. So if you turn this on, I might have to save the app and come back to see. Actually, no, it's already here. So it shows up as the last option when you click on the plus sign, and now you have access to classic controls. And these are also cool because even the classic controls by default come with the team's colors. It does obviously allow you to update those values, but if you just want to use the team's colors, you don't have to set any properties. So a lot of control options. Do check out Fluent UI controls and definitely compare the properties between the two. So because of those properties, right, it allows you to create these apps quickly, which is the biggest or the strongest point when it comes to Power Apps. The fact that you can create applications quickly is even further enhanced with Fluent UI controls. In some cases, sure, you will feel that the configuration capabilities that you get with the Fluent UI controls is kind of limited, but I don't see that as a bad thing. And then this is the link where you can go and check the difference in properties between Fluent UI controls and classic controls. So coming back to themes. So there are three themes that are available: default, dark, and high contrast. If you go to this link, it shows you the entire Fluent UI color palette, not just for Teams, but even for other Office applications. But let's talk about how you can access the Teams theme. So there are a couple of capabilities or couple of ways you can do that. One is if you are in Dataverse for Teams. Let me just add a label here and then switch to the tree view. So if I go to tree view here, you will see that there is a Teams integration control. If you have used embedded Canvas apps, which is Canvas apps embedded in a model-driven form, you would know that there is a control which is called model-driven form integration. So just like that, there is a Teams integration control which is only available for apps that are created within Dataverse for Teams. What that does is it lets you access the Teams theme and other values that I will talk about in the next slide. But if you do teams.theme.name, it will give you access to the theme that you are in. The reason why that becomes important is, let's say you are using classic controls as an example. You might want to change, right? So I might want to do something like this. So the fill color of this classic button, I might want to set it or the color either or, right? So any property when it comes to that. So if I go to color as an example, what I can say is if teams.theme.name equal to dark, set the color to red, otherwise set it to black. So now you have the ability to customize your color scheme for the three different themes that are available, which is why accessing the Teams theme becomes super important. But this Teams control is only available within Dataverse for Teams. So how would you do that if you want to add other apps that were not created in Dataverse for Teams to Teams? So the way you would do that is by using the param function. I wouldn't be able to show you that in this app, but just to give you an idea, you can use the param function, and I believe the parameter is theme. When you do that, when you like save and publish your app and run it within Teams, it will give you the Teams theme exactly the way how the Teams integration control gives. So that's why it's a feature that you can use in all the apps that you use within Teams. So with that said, I do want to talk about a little more about the Teams integration control and the param function. So I believe the next one is the Teams integration control. Like I said, it gives you access to a lot of other values, a lot of other Teams features. You can figure out what the theme is. You can figure out if the app is in full screen mode, because you might want to show certain controls or show certain functionality only when the app is in full screen. Having access to that property enables you to do that. And then you can get information like what channel am I in? Is it a regular channel or private? What team I'm in? Um, uh, if the app is added to a meeting, what is the meeting ID? And related to that, you can also figure out if the app is pinned to the side panel or not. So a lot of information, a lot of cool stuff that you can do with these properties that are available using the Teams integration control. Since I think going back to one of my original points, right, Dataverse for Teams is not just for apps created within Teams, but it also enables you to do some cool stuff for apps created outside of it. How would you do all this if you didn't create the app in Teams? It's the param function, just like how we saw, it gives you access to the Teams theme. You can get all those values using the param function as well. You can figure out if the app is in full screen, what the theme is, what is the host client type, which tells you the device that the user is using to access the app. And that one is pretty important, and we will see in the next couple of slides as to why that becomes super critical. So next thing I want to talk about is responsive app design, because there are multiple ways you can access Teams on your mobile device, on your phones, on tablets, on using the desktop app, and then on your browser as well. So given that there are so many different form factors that you can use to access your Dataverse for Teams apps, making your apps responsive becomes super critical. And this is not going to go, like, this session is not going to go super deep into how to create responsive apps, but I do want to cover some basic high level features that will help you get started with creating responsive apps. So I have an app here that I created. Yes, I'm still here. There's an app that I created which uses the param function to access all the parameters that are available. I think I might have missed a few of them, and there are a couple of them that were added recently, but it gives you a good idea of all the different values that you can access. So once this loads up, I will show you that app, which is basically not fancy at all. It has one data table control, and it has a collection of all the different parameters that I've accessed, and it shows you the parameter value and what the parameter is. So if I go to this app, should take a couple of seconds. If not, I'm just going to go back to my other tab and look at the apps that are there in this. Let me go to Teams here real quick. Let me go to my team and see if I can access those apps from there. Also, I like this window, just because we are in the dark mode here. Okay. So if I go to my first app, you will see that there is a data table control. But the couple of points I want to highlight here are, as you can see, the app is in the middle of the screen because it's a phone app. There's a lot of gray space, which is not cool. But before I go into the details of that, take a look at some of the parameters that are available. The host client type tells me that I'm accessing this app through web, and then I can get the theme as well, and then I can also get the user's role. If is he or she an owner, or is he or she just a member of the team? So anyways, coming back to the layout, this really doesn't look cool. So the first thing you would want to do is, if you go to your settings, there's a property that says optimize embedding experience. If you turn that on, which every Dataverse for Teams app has that turned on by default, but if you turn that on, what it does is it basically pins the app to the left hand side, which is definitely better than what we saw earlier. But the thing that I don't like about this layout is this white space. And the bad part about this white space is this white space doesn't adapt to the Teams theme. So even if I'm in default mode or dark mode, this section will look white. So the next thing you want to do is turn off scaling. What that does is it makes the positioning and size of controls fixed. As you can see now, it looks much better, but I still have this white space, which is something you would want to avoid. So for that, the next thing is pretty simple. All I did here is set the width of the table to be parent dot width and the height to be parent dot height. Just by setting those two values, my app now becomes what you will see now in the next couple of seconds. It covers the entire screen. So the data table utilizes the space that's available. And again, if I would have set the screen background conditionally, the background could also have been turned to black and the font could have been set to white. But now you are using the entire real estate, and if you decide to open the app in a different browser window size, it adapts to the size. So these are some high level concepts that can help you to create responsive apps. One thing, if it will allow me to open another app quickly, is I want to show you how you can test responsiveness. Because until a few weeks or months ago, the only way to test responsiveness was by saving and publishing your app and then running your app or playing your app, which was slightly painful because you would every time you make a change, you would have to publish your app and then play it. And if something was wrong, you would have to go back into the app again to make changes. Now, when you turn scaling off, there is a feature that gets turned on when you are previewing the app within the studio. It shows up here in the top right corner. So if I click on preview, there used to be just one option earlier, which was to get out of the preview mode. But now there's another option that says use the window size or the canvas size. So if you use window size and you resize your browser window or your team's desktop app, you can test responsiveness without saving and publishing your app. If I switch to canvas size, it basically just takes me back to the size that I have within the studio, and this is what was available before this feature came out. So definitely test out responsiveness by setting this to window size and resizing your window. So moving on to the next topic, the Teams connector. Let me go back a slide. So Teams connector is a feature that is available whether you're creating an app outside of Dataverse for Teams or within Dataverse for Teams. And the cool thing about that is it lets you perform functions directly in Teams from within your apps. You can create a team or a channel or a meeting. You can post adaptive cards. You can post notifications to channels. So this provides a cool way for you to integrate the capabilities of Teams and Power Apps, which is available for all Power Apps, whether they are in Dataverse for Teams or outside of it. Next thing is one of the coolest things. One of my favorite topics is, so if you have an app within Teams, one thing you might have noticed is when you switch tabs and you come back to the app, you lose your app session, which can become a problem. So I'm going to take one of the sample apps as an example, and I'm going to take the inspection app as the example here. So imagine I'm in the middle of an inspection, and let's say the inspection checklist that I'm on right now has 25 steps. I might have answered 20 of them, and maybe after that, I might have realized that I need to go to a wiki or some other tab to get some information and then get back into the app. So if I do that and I come back to the app, I would lose all my 15 or 20, whatever number of questions I've answered, and then I'll have to do that again, which is super painful. Here is a small 30-second video of that. Let's see if it renders properly. If not, I'm just going to go to my browser and show that here, because I think it's really cool to see how an app behaves in Teams and how you lose the session. So it's the inspection app, very simple, straightforward. I'm going to perform an inspection. I'm going to select an area. I'm going to select a checklist form. So I think the one I'm using here in this example is actually pretty simple. It just has 2 steps. but it's still good enough to illustrate the concept. So yeah, I'm going to click on begin inspection, go to the next screen. I'm going to answer the first question. I'm I think I'm going to mark that as okay. I'm going to add a note to the first step. And imagine if I would have taken photos, that would have made this experience even worse. But for this example, I'm just going to respond to the question and enter a note and then hit save note and then go out of the app and then come back to the app, hoping that I could resume my inspection. So if I click the back button now and I go back into the app, you can see that the only option available to me is to perform an inspection, which is to perform a new inspection. So all the answers, all the pictures that I might have taken are now lost. So what can you do to prevent that? You can save your state, and that's what I want to show you how you can do that, because I think it's a really important feature, especially within teams where the state you lose the state, you lose the session if you switch tabs. So if I click perform inspection here, select the same area, select the same checklist, and go back to my first step, my answer, which was okay, will be lost, and there will be no note for that step. So for that, I'm first going to show you. So I think I'm going to click on note here and check. There's nothing inside, so I lost all my answers. And before I show you how we can fix this, I want to show you this new experience with the changes that I will talk about in the next couple of minutes. So same app with that additional feature added in here. So I'm going to do the first set of steps are exactly the same. I'm going to select an area. I'm going to select a checklist form. Then begin inspection. Go back to my first step. Click on OK, enter a note, and then save the note. And then again, switch tabs. Probably going to go to Wiki for this particular use case, and then come back into the app and we'll see what happens. So here I am in my inspection, answering my first step here, and then entering a note. And that's when I'm going to switch tabs, which was something I used to dread. Because while you are using an app, there can be multiple reasons why you might want to switch to another part of Teams. Because I mean, there is so much functionality within Teams and other features that you might want to use between your app session. So now I'm going to go to Wiki. I'm going to go back to the app and see what happens. So the app is going to load, but it's now going to present me with a couple of options. It'll ask me if I want to perform a new inspection or if I want to continue my last inspection. And when I select continue, we will see that it doesn't prompt me to select an area or a form because it knows what I had selected in my previous session. So I'm going to click on continue last inspection, and no selection of areas, no selection of checklist form. It takes me right there. My OK response is already there. If I click on note, you will see that my note 1 is still part of that step. So I can now simply go and perform the remaining steps and complete my inspection. So super cool feature. And now we will take a look at how you can make that possible. So the feature that makes this possible is offline capabilities. And the word offline here is slightly misleading. But what you can use to make this possible is the save data function, where you can store all your data in a collection and then use the save data function to save that collection on your in a local file on your device. Couple of things that you really want to be careful about. This feature is also available on the Teams desktop app, which I think is super cool because the only couple of places where you could access this feature was the Power Apps desktop app and your mobile devices, but now it's available in Teams desktop app as well. It still doesn't work on web, so you want to make sure that you aren't reliant on this feature if the users are going to access the app on web. But the other thing that is really critical here is that the storage space is limited to 1 MB when you are accessing this feature in the Teams desktop app. What that means is you want to conditionally store data and be cognizant of the fact that you cannot store everything. Like in this inspection app, if I'm taking a lot of pictures, every picture these days is more than 1 MB. So I definitely don't want to store pictures when I'm on desktop. So how do you do that? Is by using the parameter called host client type. So if I go to my next slide here, in the app on start, you can set a variable and check if the host client type is web or desktop. So this will basically answer the question if the user is accessing this app on a mobile device or not. And then you can conditionally save data. Like for example, here I'm saying if the user is on mobile, only then save my images, otherwise don't. So this parameter becomes super useful. And as we saw earlier, you have access to this parameter in Dataverse for Teams, as well as apps that are created outside of Dataverse for Teams. You can simply use the param function to fetch this value. A few tips here. If you are using the load data function, do not ignore the third parameter, which is optional. It's called ignore non-existent file. What that means is if you're trying to load data using a local file name, if the file doesn't exist, if you set this parameter to true, it will not throw an error. If you don't set it to true, it will throw an error to the user saying the file doesn't exist. And that will always happen, like for every single app when you're using it for the very first time, because you haven't saved the data yet. So definitely set this to true so the users don't see an error when they're accessing the app for the very first time. Another thing is the clear data function, which is the third in this set of functions that are typically used for offline capabilities. In my experience, the clear data function has not worked reliantly or consistently. So what I do as a workaround is I clear my collection first. So clear call images in this case, and then I save the data back to that same local file. So by doing that, I'm kind of hacking or getting the same functionality that the clear data function would have given me by combining the clear function and the save data function. And the last one, super annoying, is the error message that you might get that says there was a problem saving your data. Name could be too long. When I saw this error for the very first time, I thought my collection names or my local file names were too long. So I actually went through the entire app, renamed my collections, renamed my local file names in the save data and load data functions in the hopes that it would save this, it would get rid of this error. But what this error actually means is the amount of data that you're trying to save on your device is more than the storage space that's available. And that was pretty easy to recreate when I was using the desktop app and I was saving images. Every time I would try to save data, it'll throw me this error. So if you see this error, it has nothing to do with your collection names or local file names. All you need to do is make sure that the amount of data that you're saving is less than the amount of storage that is available on your device, which on mobile devices is typically not a problem, but becomes a huge problem if you are using this feature in your Teams desktop app. So with that, that ends this session. I hope you like the session and Dataverse for Teams. So definitely go out there, check out the sample apps, and believe the video for this session is going to get uploaded to YouTube after 14 days. So if you've missed this session, or if you want someone else to view this session, definitely suggest to go check it out. So thank you for attending and hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions as well.